Please no. Maya's plea was desperate, tears welling up as she tried to reason with him. Don't kill me, please. I'll abort the pregnancy. No one will know. I promise, I'll do it. You can't guarantee that, Maya, he said, his voice steady, almost mechanical. This is the only way to make sure this goes away. As he reached for the gun, Maya's panic peaked. She lunged for the door, but Miller was quicker, his hand catching her arm in a vice-like grip. The struggle was brief. Maya was no match for his strength. The fear in her eyes, the betrayal in her heart, it was all too real as she faced the end. In every community, there's someone everyone trusts, someone we believe in. But sometimes, they're not who we thought they were. This story reminds us to always seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it be. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, a trusted sheriff took the life of a young girl to protect his darkest secrets, but you'll never believe how her mother fought back and what happened next. Laura Harris had spent more than half her life as a detective in Seattle, dealing with the city's darkest secrets and solving crimes that seemed unsolvable. But after years of fighting crime, she longed for peace, for a life where the loudest noise was the rustling of leaves rather than sirens. So, with her 17-year-old daughter Maya by her side, they moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin, a place known for its calm waters and community warmth rather than its crime rate. Green Bay was unlike any place Laura had known. Here, neighbors knew each other by name, and the town square was the heart where everyone gathered. It was a small, picturesque town where the autumn leaves painted the streets in shades of gold and red, and the winters brought families closer together with stories by the fireplace. The community was tight-knit, almost like a family. People left their doors unlocked, not out of negligence, but because trust was as common as the air they breathed. Maya, adjusting to this new life, was both excited and nervous. In Seattle, she was just another face in the crowd, but here, she was quickly becoming known. The local school was smaller, friendlier, where teachers knew more than just your name. They knew your dreams, your struggles. Maya found herself drawn into this web of community spirit, participating in local fairs and volunteering at the community center. Laura, having traded her badge for a quieter life, took up a job at the local library. She enjoyed the peace, the quiet hum of people browsing books, and the occasional chat about mysteries or history, her favorite topics. But even in this calm, she couldn't completely shake off her detective instincts. She observed, perhaps more than she should, the people of Green Bay. The baker who had a sweet word for everyone, the postman with stories from every corner of the town, and Sheriff Robert Miller, the golden boy of Green Bay, respected and admired. Laura and Maya settled into their new home, a quaint little house with a garden that needed love. They started anew, painting rooms, planting flowers, and slowly weaving themselves into the fabric of Green Bay. Laura felt a sense of accomplishment watching Maya make friends, laugh at the school's football games, and grow in a way she hadn't in the bustling anonymity of Seattle. But even as they embraced this new beginning, a shadow loomed, one neither Laura nor Maya could see. In this town of trust and tranquility, secrets simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to disrupt the peace. For now, though, they enjoyed the simplicity of life, the laughter of new friends, and the warmth of a community that welcomed them with open arms. Sheriff Robert Miller, known as the town's golden boy, he was the epitome of what everyone thought a lawman should be. With his sturdy build, his kind eyes that seemed to see into your heart, and his unwavering dedication to the community, Robert Miller was more than just a sheriff. He was a beacon of trust. Everywhere Robert went, he was greeted with smiles and waves. Children looked up to him, adults respected him, and even the town's old-timers would nod in approval when he passed by. His office was never just the place where law enforcement happened. It was where community issues were discussed, where lost pets were found, and where young people were guided onto the right path. Laura Harris, still adjusting to life away from the chaos of Seattle, observed this from afar. She had seen many in law enforcement, some good, some not so much, but Miller seemed different. His reputation preceded him, tales of his bravery, his fairness, and his commitment to Green Bay. She was impressed by how he treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were the mayor or the local homeless man. When Laura learned that Sheriff Miller was involved in mentoring the youth, she saw an opportunity. Maya was at an age where guidance could be crucial, especially in a new environment where she could either flourish or flounder. Maya had shown interest in law enforcement, perhaps inspired by her mother or perhaps because of the sense of justice she felt strongly about. Here was a chance for Maya to learn from one of the best, someone who could teach her not just the laws but the spirit of community service. Laura arranged for Maya to meet Sheriff Miller. The meeting was more like a casual chat in his office, where the walls were lined not with intimidating legal texts, but with pictures of community events, school teams, and smiling faces of those Miller had helped. Maya was immediately at ease with him. Miller listened intently as Maya spoke of her dreams and her curiosity about the justice system, his responses full of encouragement and real-life stories from his service. Sheriff Miller proposed a mentorship program for Maya, where she could shadow him, learn about police work, and perhaps even volunteer at community events under his guidance. It was an offer that seemed too good to pass up. Laura, seeing the genuine care in Miller's eyes and hearing the respect in his voice for all he served, felt confident in her decision. She believed this could be the key to unlocking Maya's potential, providing her with a role model who embodied everything one could hope for in law enforcement. Maya was thrilled at the prospect. She started to accompany Sheriff Miller on his rounds, participating in community safety programs, and even learning how to handle small administrative tasks at the station. To the townsfolk, it was just another example of Sheriff Miller's dedication, taking a young girl under his wing. But beneath this admired exterior, the complexities of human nature and the shadows of secrets lay hidden, unnoticed by those who only saw the golden image of Sheriff Robert Miller. Maya's journey into the world of law enforcement under Sheriff Robert Miller's mentorship began with enthusiasm. She was eager to learn, her eyes wide with the possibilities of what she could achieve. Her days were filled with community policing activities where she helped at local events, educating people about safety, and sometimes just being there to listen to the concerns of Green Bay's residents. The lessons on law were engaging, with Miller explaining concepts in a way that made sense to her teenage mind, often using real-life examples from his career. At school, Maya was the talk among her friends, her stories of shadowing the sheriff adding a layer of coolness to her persona. She shared tales of helping organize the town's safety seminar, or how she sat in on a meeting where Miller discussed community policing strategies. It felt like she was part of something bigger, something meaningful. However, as the weeks passed, Maya noticed a shift in Sheriff Miller's behavior. What started as professional guidance began to feel more personal. Miller would often find excuses to spend time with her outside the usual mentorship activities. He would suggest they grab a coffee after a community event to discuss her progress or invite her to join him for a seemingly innocuous drive around town to patrol when there was no real need for extra patrols. The professional boundaries that should have been clear were becoming blurred. Miller's compliments shifted from her work ethic to her appearance, his gaze lingering a bit too long, his questions veering into personal territory. "How are you doing at home? Do you feel lonely here in Green Bay?" He would ask with a tone that seemed overly concerned, too intimate for a mentor-student relationship. Maya, at 17, was still figuring out her boundaries. She felt flattered at first, thinking perhaps this was just part of building a strong mentor relationship. But as Miller's attention became more focused on her, she started to feel uncomfortable. He would text her late in the evening, asking about her day in a way that felt more like checking up on a girlfriend than a student. There were moments when his hand would rest on her shoulder a little too long, or he would sit too close, making her shift away subtly. Laura, observing from a distance, didn't see this change immediately. She was too caught up in her new life, her new job at the library, and the relief of seeing Maya happy with her new mentor. When Maya mentioned spending more time with Sheriff Miller, Laura saw it as a positive sign of engagement and learning. But the mentorship was turning into something it shouldn't be. Miller was crossing lines, letting his personal feelings for Maya cloud his judgment. He justified it to himself as caring mentorship, but deep down, he knew it was more. Maya, for her part, was caught in a web she didn't fully understand, unsure how to voice her discomfort without seeming ungrateful or disrespectful to someone she and her community admired so much. As this personal attention from Sheriff Miller grew, so did the seeds of concern and confusion in Maya. What had begun as a promising educational journey was now navigating into murky waters, where the lines between mentor and something else were no longer clear. The mentorship between Sheriff Robert Miller and Maya had evolved into something secretive and complex. What started as educational meetings in Miller's office or at community events was now taking place in quieter, more secluded spots around Green Bay. These meetings were no longer about law enforcement or community policing. They had turned into personal conversations, where the line between mentor and something more intimate was dangerously blurred. Miller found excuses to see Maya outside of any official capacity. They would meet at a small, hidden park on the outskirts of town or in his car parked in a quiet corner of the public library's lot, where Laura worked. These secret rendezvous were under the guise of discussing her progress, but the topics quickly shifted to personal matters. Miller would ask about her dreams, her fears, her life before Green Bay, all under the pretext of understanding her better to help her grow. Maya felt special during these meetings. Here was a man, respected by everyone, who seemed genuinely interested in her as a person, not just as a mentee. He listened to her stories about school, her friends, and even her insecurities about fitting into this new town. His attentiveness made her feel seen and valued in a way she hadn't experienced before. But with this special attention came confusion. She wasn't sure what this relationship was turning into. Miller's words were laced with compliments, not just about her potential in law enforcement, but about her as an individual. "You're not just smart, Maya. You're wise beyond your years," he would say, his voice soft, his eyes warm. He shared stories of his own life, his struggles, making her feel like she was part of a private club, privy to the personal side of the town's hero. Yet, the more time they spent together, the more Maya felt the weight of secrecy. These meetings felt wrong, not because of the content but because of the clandestine nature. She questioned why they couldn't talk openly, like they used to. Why did it feel like they were hiding something? Her teenage mind grappled with this new dynamic. She was flattered by the attention, but also aware that this wasn't how a mentorship should feel. The conversations often ended with Miller suggesting they keep their meetings confidential, for now, he would say, until you're ready to take on more responsibility in the community. It was as if he was preparing her for something bigger, something only they knew about, but Maya couldn't shake off the feeling that this secrecy wasn't about her growth, but rather about keeping something else hidden. Maya's confusion grew. She admired Miller, trusted him, but this new side of him was unsettling. She began to question if she was misinterpreting his intentions, or if there was something more she should understand. Her friends at school knew nothing of these secret meetings, and her mother, Laura, was out of the loop, still believing in the purity of the mentorship. The secrecy was starting to weigh on Maya. She valued the time with Miller, enjoyed the feeling of being someone special to him, but at what cost? The more they met in secret, the more she felt like she was part of something she wasn't sure she wanted to be involved in. The line between mentor and something else was not just blurred. It was almost invisible now. The air was cool as autumn began to take hold in Green Bay, the leaves turning into a mosaic of colors around the secluded bench where Maya and Sheriff Robert Miller met. It was one of their secret spots, away from prying eyes, where the world felt distant. Today's meeting, however, held a different weight, an unspoken tension that hung between them. Miller seemed more nervous than usual, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a hesitance that Maya had not seen before. They talked about the usual things at first, her school projects, the latest community event they'd attended together. But then, Miller's voice softened. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've grown to care about you, more than I should as your mentor." The confession hit Maya like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. She felt a mix of emotions, flattered, confused, and a bit scared. She had sensed something was changing, but hearing it aloud made it real, and she wasn't sure how to respond. Miller continued, his words coming out in a rush. "I know this is wrong, and I've tried to fight these feelings, but they're real. You've become so important to me, and I think I love you." Maya sat there, stunned. Her mind was racing. She had looked up to Miller, admired him, but love? She was just 17, and he was, well, much older, not to mention her mentor. The world seemed to tilt under her. Seeing her confusion, Miller quickly added, "But we have to keep this between us. Society wouldn't understand. They would judge us, judge me. It would ruin everything, my career, your future. We need to be careful." He painted a picture of a world that would not accept them, emphasizing the need for secrecy. He spoke of how they could continue their mentorship, but with this new understanding between them, hidden from the world's judgmental eyes. He made it sound like a noble sacrifice, a secret they would share, making their bond even stronger. The weight of his words, the gravity of the situation, made Maya feel like she was walking on thin ice. Part of her felt special, chosen by someone she held in such high regard. But another part screamed at the inappropriateness, the danger of it all. She was torn between the excitement of being loved in such a forbidden way and the fear of what it could mean for her life, her reputation, her relationship with her mother. Miller reached out, taking her hand gently, his touch both comforting and unsettling. "We can keep this between us, just for now. Until we figure out what to do," he urged, his voice a mix of plea and command. Maya, caught in the whirlwind of emotions, nodded slowly, not fully agreeing but too overwhelmed to argue. She agreed to keep their secret, not because she fully understood or consented to the implications, but because she was afraid of what exposing it might do. As they parted that day, Maya felt the burden of the confession settle on her shoulders. She was now part of a secret that could change everything: her life, her mother's trust, and the very image of the man Green Bay admired. She walked back to her new home, her mind a tumult of love, fear, and the heavy cloak of secrecy. If you're captivated by this tale of trust and betrayal, please like and subscribe to my channel for more stories that challenge your perceptions. The bond between Maya and Sheriff Miller had crossed far beyond the boundaries of mentorship into a secretive, intimate relationship. Hidden from the world, their meetings grew bolder, more personal, each encounter pushing the limits of secrecy and morality. Over the course of a few months, what was once just emotional intimacy turned physical, leaving Maya with a whirlwind of emotions: love, guilt, confusion, and now, fear. One chilly November evening, as the town of Green Bay prepared for the holiday season, Maya sat alone in her room, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her. She had missed her period, a fact she initially attributed to stress or the newness of this clandestine relationship. But when the symptoms continued, nausea in the morning, an aversion to certain smells, and an inexplicable fatigue, she couldn't ignore the possibility any longer. A pregnancy test, taken in secret, confirmed her worst fears. She was pregnant. Panic set in. At 17, the thought of bringing a child into the world under these circumstances was terrifying. She was barely navigating her own life, let alone ready to care for another. The secrecy of her relationship with Miller added layers of complexity and fear. What would her mother say? How would this affect her future? Summoning all her courage, Maya arranged to meet Miller away from prying eyes, at a spot they had come to know well. When she told him, she searched his face for reassurance, for support, but what she saw was fear. Miller's face paled, his usual composure giving way to panic. "You're sure?" was the first thing he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and dread. Maya nodded, showing him the test, her hands trembling. Miller paced, his mind racing. This changes everything, Maya. We have to think, we have to be smart about this." Maya, expecting comfort, was met with Miller's fear, his words more about protecting himself than supporting her. "No one can know, you understand? If this gets out, it's not just my career. It's everything. We need to keep this quiet, figure out a solution." His reaction was not what Maya had hoped for. She needed guidance, love, a partner in this sudden, life-altering event, but instead, she saw a man scared for his own skin. The reality of their situation hit her hard. She was alone in this, even with Miller by her side. "What do we do?" Maya asked, her voice small, desperate for any solution that didn't involve her facing this alone. Miller thought for a moment, his mind clearly calculating the risks. "We need time to think. Maybe there's a way to handle this without anyone knowing. We can't let this ruin your life, or mine." The conversation was devoid of warmth, of the love he had professed before. It was all about containment, about damage control. Maya felt a chill. The man she thought loved her was more concerned with the scandal than with her well-being. Leaving the meeting, Maya was engulfed by confusion and a growing sense of isolation. She had hoped for support, for a plan together, but instead, she was left with Miller's fear and her own burgeoning panic. The secret was now bigger, more consequential, and she knew that hiding a pregnancy would only be the beginning of a much larger cover-up. As she walked back to her house, the weight of her situation was palpable. She needed to talk to someone. But who? Her mother, who trusted Miller implicitly. A friend. Risking the secret getting out? Or keep it all inside, dealing with this on her own while Miller figured out how to save his reputation? The path ahead was murky, fraught with decisions that would shape her life in ways she could scarcely imagine. In the days following their last meeting, Maya was engulfed in a storm of emotions, the weight of her pregnancy pressing down on her like a dark cloud. She felt isolated, her mind swirling with thoughts of what to do, how to proceed, and the fear of what would happen to her life if anyone found out. Sheriff Miller, on the other hand, was in crisis mode. His initial reaction of fear had only intensified as he contemplated the ramifications of Maya's pregnancy. His career, his reputation, everything he had built in Green Bay was on the line. He knew he needed to act, and fast. He arranged another secret meeting with Maya, this time with a clear plan in mind. They met at the same secluded bench. The place that had once been a sanctuary for their forbidden love now felt like a stage for a grim discussion. "Maya, we need to talk about this seriously," Miller began, his tone more composed than before, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil within. There's only one way to keep this from destroying both our lives. Maya, already on edge, braced herself for what was coming. What do you mean? An abortion, Miller said bluntly, trying to keep his voice steady. It's the only solution. We can't let this pregnancy go on. It would ruin everything. The word abortion hit Maya like a physical blow. She had thought about it, of course, but hearing it from Miller, laid out as the only solution, made it real in a way she hadn't prepared for. Her heart raced. She was torn between relief at a potential solution and the fear of the procedure itself, the moral implications, and the pain of ending something that was part of her, part of them. I know it's hard, Miller continued, seeing her hesitation, but think about what would happen if this got out. Your mother, your future, my job. We have to be smart. He had it all planned out. He would take her to a clinic in a city far enough from Green Bay to avoid recognition, pay in cash, ensure no records were kept of her name. It was a clandestine operation, much like their relationship, designed to leave no trace. We'll go this Saturday, early in the morning. I'll pick you up before anyone's awake, he explained, his tone now authoritative, leaving little room for debate. It has to be done this way, Maya. It's for both our sakes. Maya listened, her mind a whirl of conflict. Part of her wanted to agree, to end this nightmare before it could spiral into something worse. But another part of her felt a profound loss, a sense of being pressured into a decision she wasn't sure she wanted to make. What if I want to keep it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, challenging the only plan Miller had laid out. His face hardened. Maya, you can't be serious. Think about the consequences. We don't have a choice here. The meeting ended with Maya feeling more alone than ever. Miller's plan was clear, but her heart was not. She left with the weight of his words, the fear of the procedure, and the looming decision that could alter her life forever. As she walked away, the reality of their situation was stark. This was no longer just about love or secrecy. It was about survival, about choices made in the shadows of fear and desperation. And for Maya, the path ahead was not just about deciding what to do with her pregnancy, but about who she would become in the process. Saturday came, cloaked in the early morning mist of Green Bay. Maya, her heart heavy with dread and confusion, had agreed to meet Miller, believing they were going to discuss the abortion further. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake her mother, and slipped out into the cold dawn. Miller was waiting in his car at the edge of town, his face stern in the dim light. Maya got in, the tension between them palpable. She was ready to talk, to negotiate her feelings, her fears, perhaps even to stand up for what she felt was right for her. But as they drove, not towards the city as she expected, but into a more secluded part of the countryside, her unease grew. After a while, Miller stopped the car far from any prying eyes, in a spot surrounded by dense trees, where the silence was almost suffocating. He turned to her, his expression one she had never seen before, cold, determined. Maya, I've thought about this, he began, his voice devoid of the warmth she had once heard. This isn't just about an abortion anymore. It's about ending all of this. Maya's confusion turned to horror as she realized the true nature of his plan. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. Miller's next words chilled her to the bone. I can't risk everything for this. It's too much. You're too much of a risk. This has to end here. The realization hit Maya like a bolt of lightning. He wasn't talking about the pregnancy. He was talking about her life. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the outline of a gun in his jacket. Please no. Maya's plea was desperate, tears welling up as she tried to reason with him. Don't kill me, please. I'll abort the pregnancy. No one will know. I promise, I'll do it. Her words were a frantic attempt to save her life, to appeal to any sense of humanity or love he might still feel. But Miller's resolve seemed unshakable, driven by fear and self-preservation. You can't guarantee that, Maya, he said, his voice steady, almost mechanical. This is the only way to make sure this goes away. Maya's mind raced for any escape, any chance. She begged, pleaded, promised secrecy, loyalty, anything to change his mind. She spoke of her mother, her dreams, the life she had yet to live, trying to remind him of the girl he once cared for, but Miller was not the man she thought she knew. His eyes were those of a man cornered, seeing only one way out. As he reached for the gun, Maya's panic peaked. She lunged for the door, but Miller was quicker, his hand catching her arm in a vice-like grip. The struggle was brief. Maya was no match for his strength. The fear in her eyes, the betrayal in her heart, It was all too real as she faced the end. But in that moment of ultimate betrayal, Maya's will to live, her young life's desperate fight, flickered with one last hope. She screamed, a piercing sound that cut through the silence of the morning, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, might hear. Miller's next move would decide everything. The gun was in his hand, the weight of his decision hanging in the air like the morning fog. But was this truly the only way out for him, or was there a shred of the man Maya thought she knew left within him? If this story has you invested in the pursuit of justice, please like and subscribe for more narratives that delve into the complexities of human nature. The morning light had barely touched the sky when Laura Harris woke up to find Maya's room empty. At first, she thought Maya might have gone for an early walk, but as the hours passed without any sign of her daughter, the initial annoyance turned into deep concern. Maya's phone was on her bedside table, suggesting she hadn't planned to be gone long, or at all. Laura's calls went unanswered, and panic began to set in. She called Maya's friends, the school, but no one had seen her. It was out of character for Maya to disappear without a word, especially not with her phone left behind. Laura's detective instincts kicked in, but they were clouded by a mother's fear. Meanwhile, Sheriff Robert Miller was busy planting seeds of misinformation. With a heavy heart but a clear mind on self-preservation, he started talking to people in town, weaving a narrative that would protect him. I heard Maya was unhappy here, talked about going back to Seattle, he would say casually at the diner or while on patrol. She seemed restless lately, might have run away. The rumors spread like wildfire in the tight-knit community of Green Bay. Miller even posted on the town's social media pages, asking if anyone had seen Maya, suggesting she might have left for the city, playing the concerned mentor. If anyone knows anything, please let me know. We need to make sure she's safe. His actions were calculated. By framing Maya's absence as a runaway case, he hoped to divert any suspicion from himself. He had disposed of any evidence linking him to Maya that morning, ensuring there was nothing concrete to trace back to him. The gun was returned to its safe place, and the car was meticulously cleaned. Laura, however, was not so easily swayed by the rumors. She knew her daughter. Maya wouldn't just run away without saying goodbye, especially not without her phone. Her investigative skills were now in overdrive. She started piecing together Maya's last known movements, talking to anyone who might have seen or spoken to her daughter. But Miller was one step ahead. When Laura came to him for help, he played the part of the concerned friend of the family, offering his full support in the search while subtly reinforcing the narrative he had created. I'll do everything in my power to find her, Laura. I know how much she means to you. The town of Green Bay was in a state of unrest. Flyers with Maya's picture were everywhere. Community searches were organized, but Miller ensured the focus was outward, towards the possibility of her leaving town, not inward towards him. Days turned into weeks, and with no sign of Maya, the story of her disappearance began to shift in public perception. Some believed the runaway story, others speculated on teenage rebellion, but for Laura, every day was a nightmare of unanswered questions and growing suspicion, especially towards Miller, who seemed too calm, too prepared with his narrative. The sheriff had managed to control the narrative, but the truth was buried, along with Maya, in a place only he knew. The town continued its search, but with each passing day, the hope of finding Maya alive diminished, and the story of her running away became the accepted tale. Laura, however, was not giving up. Her instincts told her something was terribly wrong, and her journey from grief to vengeance was just beginning. She would uncover the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. The official narrative that Maya had run away didn't sit right with her. It clashed with everything she knew about her daughter. Maya was not one to leave without a word, especially not with her phone left behind. A phone that was her lifeline to friends, to her new life in Green Bay. Laura's grief was profound, but it was intertwined with an unyielding suspicion. Her years as a detective in Seattle had honed her skills in reading people, in sensing when something wasn't as it seemed. And now, that intuition was screaming at her that the story of Maya's disappearance was a fabrication. She started her investigation unofficially, not trusting the local law enforcement due to Miller's involvement. The first thing she did was retrace Maya's steps on the day she vanished. She spoke to everyone Maya might have interacted with, from school friends to local shopkeepers. Each conversation, each piece of information, was logged in her mind. Laura noticed changes in Miller's behavior. He was too eager to help, too quick with his explanations, too ready with the narrative of Maya running away. His eyes didn't meet hers like before. There was a shift, a guardedness that hadn't been there. She remembered how Miller had taken Maya under his wing, how he had seemed like the perfect mentor. Now, She questioned every moment of that relationship. She began to dig into Miller's life discreetly, looking for inconsistencies, for signs he might have been hiding something more than just his feelings for Maya. She checked public records, old news articles, anything that might give her insight into the man everyone trusted. Her investigation led her to talk to those who had worked closely with Miller. She listened for any off comments, any hint that Miller might not be as clean as his reputation suggested. She gathered that Miller had been under stress recently, more than usual, but no one could pinpoint why. Laura also revisited the places where Maya and Miller might have met. The park bench, the library parking lot. She looked for signs, for anything that might have been overlooked. She found nothing concrete, but the absence of evidence was telling in its own way. The more she investigated, the more her suspicion grew. She started noting Miller's movements, observing him from a distance when she could, looking for any slip-up, any moment where his facade might crack. She knew that if something had happened to Maya, Miller was at the center of it. One evening, in the solitude of her home, with Maya's room untouched as a shrine to hope, Laura decided to take her suspicions further. She began compiling all her findings, her notes, her gut feelings, into a coherent case. She knew she had no official standing to investigate, but she also knew that if she didn't do something, Maya's story might be buried under the convenient narrative Miller had crafted. Her investigation was not just about finding Maya. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The thought that Miller might have harmed her daughter was a torment, but it fueled her resolve. She would use every skill she had learned, every ounce of her love for Maya, to uncover what happened that fateful morning. Laura knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, questioning the town's golden boy, but for Maya, for justice, she was ready to face whatever came her way. Her suspicion had transformed into a mission, and she was just beginning to understand the depth of the secrets Green Bay might be hiding. Laura's investigation was now fueled by a mix of maternal instinct and detective acumen. She knew she was onto something, but she needed more to connect the dots. Her focus was now laser-sharp on Miller, but she needed something undeniable to confront him or to go to a higher authority. While searching through Maya's room for any sign, any clue, Laura's hands fell upon a hidden compartment in Maya's desk drawer. Inside was a diary, its cover adorned with stickers that screamed teen spirit. With a pounding heart, Laura opened it, hoping for answers. The diary was a window into Maya's soul, her thoughts, her fears, and her secret life. As Laura read, she discovered the full extent of Maya's relationship with Miller. Each page turned was like peeling back layers of a hidden world, revealing the inappropriate relationship, the secret meetings, the confusion, and the love Maya felt for a man who should have been nothing more than a mentor. One entry, dated just few months before Maya's disappearance, detailed Miller's confession of love, his insistence on secrecy, and Maya's turmoil over it. Another spoke of their intimacy, the fear of discovery, and then, the bombshell, Maya's realization of her pregnancy and Miller's reaction to it. Laura's scream echoed through the silent house as she read about Maya's age. She was only 17. The words on the page blurred through her tears. The betrayal, the manipulation, the sheer wrongness of it all hit her like a physical blow. The diary entries continued, growing darker as Maya wrote about Miller's plan for an abortion, his fear of exposure, his control over her decisions. The last entry was days before Maya vanished, filled with dread, confusion, and a desperate hope that things could somehow go back to how they were before. Holding the diary, Laura felt a mix of rage and grief. This was the evidence she needed, not just of Maya's emotional turmoil but of Miller's abuse of power. She knew now that Miller's narrative was not just a cover-up for a runaway, but possibly for something far more sinister. With the diary as her anchor, Laura's resolve hardened. She would use this to bring Miller down, to find out what happened to her daughter, no matter how painful the journey. The diary had given her the strength to fight, to seek justice for Maya, who was only 17 when her life was entangled in this dark web. One evening, as Laura was leaving the local diner after another day of inquiries, a young gas station worker named Jake approached her. He had been hesitant, watching from a distance, but finally, the weight of what he saw compelled him to speak. "Mrs. Harris, I think I saw Maya that morning she went missing," he said, his voice low, eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. Laura's heart skipped a beat. Where? When? Jake described how he had been opening the gas station early that Saturday when he saw Maya in Sheriff Miller's car. She didn't look right. She seemed scared, upset. I thought it was strange because Miller was always so calm, but he looked tense, like he was arguing with her. he continued, explaining that he didn't pay it much mind at the time, thinking it was just a mentor-student disagreement, but after hearing about Maya's disappearance and the rumors, he couldn't shake off the image of her distressed face. "Do you remember exactly when this was?" Laura pressed, her detective mind cataloging every detail. "Around 5:30 a.m., before the sun was up. They were in his car at the pump closest to the road, heading out of town. This was crucial. It placed Maya with Miller at a time and place that contradicted the narrative Miller had spread." Laura thanked Jake profusely, her mind racing with the implications. She knew this could be the break she needed, the witness who saw something that could unravel Miller's lies. Jake's fear was palpable. "I don't want any trouble, Mrs. Harris. Miller is well liked here. I don't want to be on his bad side." Laura understood the gravity of what he was doing, risking his standing in a small town. She assured him of confidentiality, promising to protect his identity as much as she could. "You've done the right thing, Jake. You might be the key to finding out what happened to Maya." With this new piece of the puzzle, Laura felt a surge of hope and determination. She now had a witness who could place Maya with Miller during the critical hours of her disappearance. This wasn't just about piecing together clues anymore. It was about confronting Miller with evidence he couldn't easily dismiss. Laura knew she had to act carefully but swiftly. She documented Jake's statement, ensuring she had every detail, every nuance of his account. She contemplated her next move. Should she go to a higher authority outside of Green Bay, or confront Miller directly with this new information? The stakes were high, not just for justice for Maya but for the safety of Jake, who had come forward. Laura decided she would need to prepare thoroughly, gather more evidence if possible, and maybe even involve a journalist from outside the town to ensure the story couldn't be buried. This witness, this moment, was a turning point. It was the first real crack in Miller's armor, and Laura was ready to widen it until the truth shone through. With the information from Jake, Laura Harris knew she had to act, but she had to do it discreetly. She couldn't trust the local police, not with Sheriff Miller potentially involved, so she took matters into her own hands. She mapped out the possible routes Miller could have taken that morning, focusing on isolated areas where one might conceal a body. Laura's investigation took her to the outskirts of Green Bay, to a place she had never been before. An abandoned quarry, now overgrown with trees and underbrush, a place forgotten by time except for the occasional hiker or hunter. It matched Jake's description of the direction Miller's car was heading. Armed with a flashlight, a shovel she had borrowed under the pretense of gardening, and her phone for evidence, Laura ventured into the dense woods surrounding the quarry. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. The weight of what she might find pressed on her, each step heavy with dread yet driven by an unyielding need to know. After hours of searching, following her intuition more than any concrete clue, Laura stumbled upon a spot where the ground looked recently disturbed. Her heart raced as she began to dig, the shovel cutting through the soft earth. With each shovelful, her hope of finding Maya alive diminished, replaced by a grim certainty. It wasn't long before her shovel hit something unnatural, a piece of fabric. Brushing away the soil, she uncovered what she had feared the most: Maya's clothes, her shoes, her body. There, in an isolated corner of the world, was her daughter, her life stolen away, hidden from the light of justice. Laura's scream was one of grief, of anger, of a mother's heart shattering. She fell to her knees, the reality of what Miller had done now undeniable. She took photos, documented everything she could with trembling hands, knowing this was not just a moment of closure but the beginning of Miller's downfall. She called a friend in the Seattle PD, someone she trusted implicitly, explaining the situation in a voice that was both broken and determined. "I need help. I found Maya, but I need this to be handled by someone not connected to Green Bay." Her friend promised to come immediately, to bring in the right people, to ensure Miller couldn't manipulate the situation. As night fell, Laura stayed by Maya's side, guarding her daughter's body, protecting her in death as she couldn't in life. She whispered apologies, promises of justice, love that transcended even this darkest of moments. This discovery was more than just finding Maya. It was proof of Miller's crime, a catalyst for justice. Laura knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, with Miller's influence in Green Bay, but she was armed with the truth now. She would fight, not just for Maya but for every secret Green Bay might have harbored under its peaceful facade. The quarry, a place of death, would become the starting point of Miller's end. Laura would ensure that, even if it was the last thing she did. If this story has moved you to reflect on the power of community and truth, like and subscribe for more stories that inspire change. The night after discovering Maya's body, Laura Harris was fueled by a rage that was cold and calculating. She had informed her trusted friend from Seattle PD, who was on his way to handle the situation with discretion and urgency. But before any official action, Laura knew she needed to confront Miller, to see the man who had ruined her life, to look him in the eyes with the truth she now held. She waited until the morning, when Miller would be at the station, in his office, surrounded by the illusion of authority and respect. She walked into the sheriff's office, her presence unannounced but not unwelcome, given her status as Maya's mother. Miller was at his desk, the picture of calm, the very image of integrity that had fooled so many. "Sheriff Miller," Laura began, her voice steady despite the storm within. "We need to talk?" Miller looked up, his expression one of feigned concern. "Laura, I've been doing everything I can to find Maya. We're all devastated." "Stop," Laura cut him off, her tone sharp as she placed the photos of Maya's grave on his desk. "I found her, Robert, in the quarry, buried like trash. You did this." The color drained from Miller's face, but he quickly regained his composure. "Laura, you're upset. I understand, but I'm not upset. I'm certain," Laura interrupted again, her eyes burning with a mother's fury. "Jake from the gas station saw you with Maya that morning. He saw her distress. And now, I have proof you tried to hide." Miller stood, his stance intimidating, trying to reclaim control of the situation. "You think you can walk in here with these accusations? You're grieving, Laura. You're not thinking clearly. This could ruin lives, mine, yours, for nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding." Laura didn't waver. She stood her ground, her voice firm. "I am thinking clearly, clearer than I have in weeks. You took advantage of my daughter, you got her pregnant, and when it threatened your perfect life, you decided her life was expendable. But you underestimated one thing: a mother's resolve to find the truth." Miller's eyes narrowed, the facade slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "You have no proof of anything beyond a body. You can't prove I did this." Laura leaned in, her voice low but fierce. "I have more than you think. I have Maya's diary, detailing everything you did, every secret meeting, every manipulation. And now, I have a witness. It's over, Robert. Your control here ends today." Miller tried to intimidate her further, stepping closer, his voice a threatening whisper. "Think carefully, Laura. You don't want to make an enemy of me. Green Bay is my town, and I can make life very difficult for you." But Laura was beyond fear. She looked at him with a mix of disgust and determination. "You've already made my life a nightmare, but I'm not alone. There are people coming who aren't from Green Bay, who won't be swayed by your influence. You can't control this anymore." The tension in the room was palpable, a standoff between a mother's vengeance and a man's desperate cling to power. Miller knew his position was crumbling, but tried one last power play. "You don't know what you're starting." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Laura replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm starting the end of your reign, Robert. Justice for Maya, and I will watch you fall." With that, Laura turned her back on Miller, leaving his office with the dignity of a warrior. She had confronted him, stood her ground, and now, the wheels of justice were in motion. Miller's intimidation had failed. Laura Harris was a force no longer to be underestimated or silenced. After her confrontation with Sheriff Miller, Laura Harris didn't waste time. She returned to Seattle, where she once served as a detective, knowing she needed allies who were beyond Miller's reach. She contacted Chief Thompson, her former superior, laying out the entire case, from Maya's diary to the witness statement and the grim discovery at the quarry. Chief Thompson, moved by Laura's story and recognizing the gravity of the situation, immediately got in touch with the district attorney, DA, in Green Bay. He shared the evidence, underscoring the need for an impartial investigation. The DA, after reviewing the compelling case Laura had built, the diary, the photographs, Jake's testimony, understood that this was not just a local matter, but one that could shake the foundations of Green Bay. The DA contacted the state authorities, ensuring that the case would be handled by someone outside Miller's influence. Together, they presented the evidence to the sheriff's DA, who, after a thorough review, saw no way around issuing an arrest warrant for Sheriff Robert Miller on charges of murder, abuse of power, and more. The arrest happened swiftly and publicly. Early one morning, as Green Bay was waking up to its usual peaceful routine, state police, not the local force, arrived at Miller's home. The sight of officers, unfamiliar in their uniforms, handcuffing the town's golden boy was a shock that rippled through the community like wildfire. Miller was led away, his head bowed, the reality of his fall from grace stark under the morning sun. The town was in disbelief, whispers turning into loud conversations as the news spread. People gathered outside the sheriff's station and on street corners, trying to comprehend how their admired protector could be accused of such horrific acts. The media descended on Green Bay, turning the small town into a focal point of national interest. News vans, reporters with microphones, and cameras captured the unfolding drama. Laura, from the sidelines, watched with a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing this was just the beginning of the healing process, but also the end of a chapter of her life. In the aftermath, the town was split. Some couldn't believe Miller was capable of such evil, clinging to the image of him they had known. Others felt a betrayal so deep it shook their faith in the community. Yet, there was a collective understanding that justice was necessary, no matter how painful. As the story of Miller's arrest spread across social media, blogs, and news outlets, Laura took a moment to reflect. She had fought for Maya, for justice, and now with Miller in custody, her fight was shifting to the courtroom. But she knew she wasn't alone. The community, even in its disbelief and division, was part of this journey now. If this tale of betrayal has you gripped, like and subscribe for more. With Sheriff Robert Miller's arrest, Green Bay became the epicenter of a media storm. News outlets from across the nation, and even international correspondents, descended upon the small town, eager to cover what had quickly become one of the most shocking stories of the year. The narrative of the beloved sheriff accused of murder and abuse was too compelling to ignore. Laura Harris, once a private woman dealing with personal tragedy, found herself thrust into the media spotlight. At first, she was reluctant, her grief and anger still raw, but she soon realized that the media could be an ally in her fight for justice. She began giving interviews, appearing on news channels, and using social media to advocate for the truth, to keep Maya's story alive, and to ensure Miller's actions were not buried under the weight of his former reputation. She spoke with conviction, her pain palpable, her resolve inspiring. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about holding someone accountable who was supposed to protect us," she told one journalist. Her words resonated, drawing sympathy and support from across the country. People followed her updates, her crusade for justice, turning her into an unexpected advocate for victims of abuse of power. Laura used this attention not only to keep pressure on the case, but also to raise awareness about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of community vigilance. She encouraged others who might have been victims or witnesses to come forward, turning the media frenzy into a call for broader societal change. The trial of Robert Miller was a spectacle that gripped the nation. Held in a courthouse outside Green Bay to ensure impartiality, the courtroom was packed every day with media, local residents, and those who had followed the case from afar. The prosecution laid out their case meticulously, beginning with Maya's diary, which painted a vivid picture of the secret relationship, the pregnancy, and Miller's control over her life. The diary entries were read aloud, each word echoing with the weight of betrayal and manipulation. Jake, the gas station worker, was among the first to testify, recounting the morning he saw Maya in distress with Miller. His testimony was crucial, providing a timeline and a witness to Maya's last known moments. His voice trembled, not from fear but from the gravity of what he had seen and kept silent about for too long. Other witnesses followed, including those who had noticed changes in Miller's behavior. Friends, colleagues, and even former men spoke of how Miller had become more secretive, more defensive, especially in the weeks leading up to Maya's disappearance. One former deputy testified about Miller's unusual request for privacy on certain days, hinting at when he might have been meeting Maya. Laura herself took the stand, her testimony a poignant mix of personal loss and professional insight. She spoke of Maya's personality, her dreams, and how out of character her disappearance was, building a narrative of a loving daughter taken too soon by someone trusted by the community. The defense tried to paint Miller as a victim of circumstance, suggesting that Maya might have been involved with others, that the diary could be fabricated, but the overwhelming evidence, coupled with the emotional testimonies, made their arguments seem weak in comparison. As the trial progressed, the public's perception of Miller shifted from disbelief to a sober acknowledgement of the possibility that they had been deceived by one of their own. Every day of the trial added layers to the understanding of how power, when unchecked, could lead to such profound betrayal. The trial was not just about one man's guilt. It was a lesson, a wake-up call, broadcasted across screens, reminding everyone of the importance of transparency, truth, and justice. As the trial of Sheriff Robert Miller moved forward, the defense knew they were up against a mountain of evidence. Their strategy shifted towards creating reasonable doubt, attempting to muddy the waters by suggesting alternative scenarios and casting doubt on the reliability of the witnesses and the evidence presented. The defense's main tactic was to portray Miller as a man caught in a web of circumstances beyond his control. They brought in character witnesses who spoke of Miller's long history of service, his contributions to the community, attempting to humanize him and separate his public persona from the allegations. They argued that Maya's diary might have been manipulated or misunderstood, suggesting that she might have had other relationships or that her entries were the fantasies of a troubled teenager. They even floated the idea that Maya could have run away, staging her own disappearance for reasons unknown, perhaps to escape a complicated life or a different form of abuse at home. However, these attempts to shift blame or cast doubt were met with strong rebuttals from the prosecution. They highlighted the forensic evidence, the soil from the quarry matching Miller's boots, the timeline established by Jake's testimony, and the lack of any other suspects who could have had both the motive and opportunity. The prosecution brought in forensic experts who confirmed that the diary entries were consistent in handwriting and ink, with no signs of forgery. They also presented digital evidence from Miller's phone, showing communications that corroborated the time and places Maya mentioned in her diary, effectively connecting Miller to the scenes of their secret meetings. One pivotal moment came when the defense tried to discredit Jake by suggesting he might have mistaken the day or misinterpreted what he saw. But Jake stood firm, his testimony bolstered by security camera footage from the gas station that placed Miller's car there at the exact time he claimed, with Maya visibly distressed in the passenger seat. The defense's attempts to blame others, including an unsubstantiated theory about Laura having enemies in Seattle who might have framed Miller, fell flat. Laura's reputation as an ex-detective, her immediate involvement in the search for Maya, and her clear motive to find her daughter made such theories seem desperate and baseless. Moreover, the prosecution had the final say with the testimony of a young woman from another town, who came forward after the media coverage, claiming she had a similar experience with Miller years ago. Her story, though not directly related to Maya's case, painted a pattern of behavior that was hard to ignore, further damaging Miller's defense. As the defense wrapped up, it was evident that their attempts to shift blame or create doubt were not only unconvincing but also seemed to backfire. The evidence, both physical and circumstantial, overwhelmingly pointed to Miller's guilt. The jury, the public watching, and even some of the defense team seemed to recognize that this was not a case of reasonable doubt, but of overwhelming proof of Miller's actions. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, the silence heavy with the weight of the truth that could no longer be obscured by desperate legal maneuvers. Miller, once a figure of authority and respect, now sat in the dock, his fate in the hands of those he once thought he controlled. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation as the jury returned after what seemed like an eternity but was, in reality, only a few hours. The speed at which they came back suggested a clear consensus among the jurors. Silence fell as they filed in, their faces giving nothing away until the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Robert Miller, guilty on all counts," he announced, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the decision. A collective gasp, followed by murmurs, swept through the room. Laura Harris, sitting in the front row, closed her eyes for a moment, a mix of relief and grief washing over her. The verdict was the end of one journey and the beginning of another, the path to healing and closure. Miller's face showed no emotion, a stark contrast to the storm of reactions around him. His defense team looked defeated, while the prosecution, led by the DA, nodded in acknowledgement of the jury's decision. The judge, maintaining decorum, thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for a later date. As Miller was led away, the reality of his fall from grace was palpable. The once celebrated sheriff was now just another convicted felon, his deeds exposed in the harsh light of justice. The sentencing of Robert Miller was a somber affair, the courtroom filled with those who had followed the case closely, including journalists, community members, and victims' rights advocates. The judge, with a stern voice that carried the weight of the law and the community's betrayal, addressed Miller before handing down the sentence. "Robert Miller, you were entrusted with the safety and well-being of this community, a trust you not only violated but betrayed in the most heinous way. You abused your power, manipulated a young life, and then took it, believing yourself above the law. For the crime of murder, the manipulation of a minor, and the gross misuse of your office, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The judge's words echoed through the silent room, each syllable a condemnation of Miller's actions. The sentence was not just about punishment. It was a statement to the community about the sanctity of trust and duty in public service. Miller showed no emotion, his face a mask of acceptance or perhaps resignation to his fate. As he was led away, the finality of his life behind bars settled in the minds of everyone present. With the sentencing concluded, Laura Harris felt a whirlwind of emotions. There was relief, a heavy sigh released from the burden of seeking justice for Maya, but it was mingled with profound sorrow. The trial, the media attention, the public dissection of her life and her daughters had taken its toll, but now, there was a chance to begin healing. Laura stood outside the courthouse, the sun setting, casting long shadows that seemed symbolic of the journey ahead. She had fought hard, not just for justice but for Maya's memory, to ensure her daughter wasn't just another statistic but a catalyst for change. The community was also in a state of reflection. The betrayal by one of their own had left a scar, but it also ignited conversations about trust, vigilance, and the need for systemic changes in how law enforcement was perceived and managed. Laura knew healing would not be swift or simple. She started attending support groups for parents who had lost children under tragic circumstances, finding solace in shared grief and strength in collective healing. She also began working with local advocacy groups to push for reforms in how mentorship and youth programs were conducted, ensuring better safeguards were in place. Her home, once filled with the laughter and presence of Maya, was now a place of quiet remembrance. Laura turned Maya's room into a memorial, a space where she could feel close to her daughter while also looking forward to what her life could now be. She started writing, pinning down her journey not only as a way to process her grief, but to help others who might find themselves in a similar nightmare. The town of Green Bay slowly began to heal as well. Community meetings were held to discuss how to move forward, focusing on rebuilding trust with law enforcement, educating the public on rights and responsibilities, and fostering a community where such betrayal could never hide again. For Laura, the journey to heal was lifelong. She honored Maya by living, by advocating for change, by ensuring that her daughter's story was not just one of tragedy but one of resilience, love, and the pursuit of justice. The aftermath was about finding new beginnings in the shadow of loss, about turning pain into purpose. Laura Harris decided to found the Maya Harris Foundation. Dedicated to her daughter, the foundation aimed to mentor young women, providing them with a safe space to grow, learn, and build their self-esteem. The programs were designed around education and safety, self-defense, and personal empowerment, ensuring young women knew their rights and how to protect themselves. Laura, alongside volunteers who had been touched by Maya's story, developed workshops that focused not only on physical safety but also on mental health, leadership, and the importance of community support. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope, transforming grief into action, ensuring that Maya's legacy was one of empowerment and prevention. A year after the sentencing, Green Bay unveiled a memorial for Maya Harris. Located in the town square, where community life pulsed, the memorial was more than just a statue. It was a place of reflection, learning, and change. The design was simple yet profound, featuring a sculpture of a young woman reading, symbolizing the pursuit of knowledge and the quiet strength of youth. Around the statue, there were benches for contemplation and plaques with Maya's favorite quotes about courage, justice, and the power of one's voice. The memorial became a spot for community events, discussions on social issues, and a reminder of the impact one life can have. It stood as a testament to what could be achieved when a community came together in the face of tragedy to foster change. The scandal of Sheriff Miller led to significant reforms in Green Bay's law enforcement practices. New policies were implemented focusing on transparency, accountability, and community engagement. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, there were regular community forums where residents could voice concerns, and an independent oversight committee was established to review police conduct. Training programs were revamped to include extensive education on ethics, power misuse, and the psychological aspects of policing. The community policing model was strengthened to ensure officers were not just enforcers, but also protectors and mentors within the community. Laura's journey from grief to action has not only honored her daughter's memory, but has also sparked a movement for change in Green Bay and beyond. Through the Maya Harris Foundation, the memorial, and the community reforms, a legacy of resilience, education, and vigilance has been established. Remember, In the darkest times, there's a chance to shine a light on the path forward. Use your voice, support one another, and never underestimate the power of community action. Change starts with one person, one story, one act of bravery. If this story of love, loss, and ultimate triumph has touched you, please like and subscribe for more narratives that illuminate the human spirit. Make sure you comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you.